She received her PhD in psychology in behavioral neuroscience at State University of New York, Binghamton, where she also earned her MA. And she has a dual Bachelor of Science in biology and psychology from Wright State University. She's currently an associate professor of psychology at the University of Evansville, where she's also director of neuroscience, and her research focuses on human and animal emotions with regard to decision making.
Next point where you hook all the electronics come to life. It's coming. Seriously, it's there. All right. So today I'm going to tackle a broad topic from the lens of neuroscience, looking at emotions and logic and how they are portrayed through the human mind, and hopefully angling this to help us explain some of the trends in politics that we've seen recently. Okay, so political trends, let's define these. I am going after hyperpartisanship, which I hope to argue is extreme kinship, resulting in some inconsistency in what that kinship set out to be in the first place, and nationalism. So more extreme kinship that supersedes the founding principles of that nation and goes into chants of USA, USA. All right, so humans have evolved to survive in an environment wrought with threats to life by using their emotion and their reason. Hope to guide you through a quick study of the human brain and how it generates and directs our emotions and reasons, and how this can help explain these political trends that we have. But first off, let's start with emotion. So, why do we have emotion? After all, at times it makes life harder. So, one of the main effects of feeling and expressing emotions is to keep us safe. Aww. Recognized worldwide, facial expressions and emotions signal information to others. If a food item tastes bad, or we see someone reject a food item, we are more likely to avoid it in the future. Why almost all restaurants and food selling ads show people consuming food? Oh, it must be good there. When someone hurts us or insults us during a first meeting, the majority of the time it's hard to build a friendship with them. There is a notable exception, but right now they're in the United States. The principal and his wife didn't like each other at first, but now they've been married for several years. Secondly, emotions allow us to bond in groups. So you see the celebration of football fans, all synchronized as a community. If I had sound, they would be chanting the same thing. The essence of the golden rule, do unto others what you have them do to you, is found paraphrased through most of the major religions and used as a basis of reasoning for many societal groups and society-minded individuals. Ability to live with and among others requires us to recognize and interpret emotional responses correctly. The better we are at interpreting this is now touted as emotional intelligence. The better we are at teamwork, relationships, and achieving our chosen profession relies a lot on emotional intelligence. Emotional support also is important when we experience fear, especially as a child. It takes a support group to encourage us to try again, to face the fear. That support group, whether it be your parents, siblings, friends, or the work of a trusted author for the introvert readers among us. This can be a guide and a familiar voice in our head that allows us to face further challenges. Okay, until life sends us a blow that forces us to either accept the message as true or totally throw it out and start over. We use emotional responses as we design ways of living, ways that allow us to interact quickly and efficiently with others. These social rules that are made through these emotional responses tend to work as long as we share the same rule base. These rules are guided by our sense of reason. Reasoning and rationalization are tools used to weigh our thoughts on a situation. From an early age, we're asked to make a choice between opposing items, one that leads to instant happiness and the other to delayed gratification. This takes us to the marshmallow test. Okay, show of hands, who knows the marshmallow test? Sweet. Okay, with the marshmallow test, you take a young child, or challenge an adult, to sit down in a room with a plate in front of them and put a marshmallow in front of them, or to make it more challenging, their favorite snack. And before you leave the room, you say, if the marshmallow is still there when I come back, you can have two. And you leave the room. And then you get looks like this. And please, I don't want to look at it anymore if I just shut my eyes. And what they've done is they've tested many 4- and 5-year-olds. And those who are able to withstand the temptation actually do better when they follow them out in their career. They delay that temptation, they do the thing they're supposed to do, and then they get the double reward. So we have this learning about the logic of let me back up a little. Learning the logic of why we should make a decision beyond our emotional desire to grab the marshmallow and eat it. Reasoning and rationalization are tools that we use to weigh the thoughts of the situation, and it's driven many philosophical arguments about the best way to run one's life. So here's who? We've seen this picture before. Plato and Aristotle. Ah, yes. Even neuroscience can use them. They argue that Plato and his student Aristotle influenced many late thinkers on the necessity of reason to rule over our passions and spirit, otherwise, to rule over our emotions. This extends into the origins of a split between the human animal and other animals. We have the reason, other animals just have emotion. To be sure, our emotions like that mental superiority and hold dearly the thought that we are humans, not animals. Just like high school a science student will say, you mean we're animals? Although we have ample evidence that we are humans, basically not minerals, fungi, bacteria, we have the greatest capacity to alter the world of any other animal and explore nearly all arenas. Now, I haven't gotten all the technology to work, so I need to pop over to here to show you all the arenas we have been able to explore. All areas of our planet, all areas of the moon, and now where we put a Tesla in space. I don't know how great it is when we put a Tesla in space, but we did. It's orbiting the sun. How did we get this far? How did we rationalize and get to the point where we could make Tesla happen? Okay, car in space. You've seen that. Examination of other species combined with the cognitive and social neuroscience findings of humans provide insight into how humans react to basic threats to life and how these reactions can generate new problems in a first world environment. So, a brief journey through the emotional and reasoning brain. So, just if you don't realize how small our brains really are, here's the head, here's a brain. It's not really that color. Here is an image outside. And let's start with the first brain region that's important, the ones that come together for our fight flight. So, a little angry, you think? Right now, the child is angry and the parents want to take flight. So both of them. Our flight-fight system is bringing in information about stimuli that could cause us to be angry or for us to be scared. And it is a reflexive, hardwired response. When we're young, we're really good at letting it go. When we get older, we have to learn to hold it in. So that fight-flight system is triggered by the amygdala. It is a special area inside the brain that will pick up on that stimuli, the snake that scares you, the assignment that you just realized was on your list. Oops. Now, these are critical for us to survive, and we also have to learn from them. So then we have the hippocampus. Dory is a really good example of somebody or some character who has trouble with her hippocampus. Hippocampus helps you remember. If you saw a hippopotamus on campus, you'd remember it. Yes. So these two areas, the amygdala that sets off fight flight and the hippocampus, are nicely connected. Here's the amygdala, here's the hippocampus. Have you ever noticed that you can remember arguments really well? Okay. Now, have you noticed that it's hard to remember the last time you got a really nice surprise? Weren't you as emotionally engaged in both? Oh, because we don't have a happy joy part of our brain. We have a rage and fear amygdala that connects with our hippocampus. So we can remember those bad things and be worried about them and worry that they're going to happen again. Also, let's move to the orbital frontal cortex up here. It's a very nice big name to say the front of your frontal cortex. This is where we say we have personality, reason, socially appropriate behavior. So you know how to socially appropriately run out of the room when something scares the heck out of you. Yes. Also, here's a little more of a wiring diagram where we have the amygdala, the hippocampus is right back here, the frontal cortex, they're all wiring together. They say that the difference between an extrovert and an introvert is the level of wiring here. So an extrovert, not so much. Amygdala goes, I'm scared, and the frontal cortex goes, eh. Introvert goes, that could be kind of scary, and the frontal cortex goes, whoa, stop, let's not do anything. So, this is how we decide and reason. These areas. Now, let's head on to a couple of areas that help us figure out what we're looking at. Fusiform face area. It's down in the temporal lobe, and it actually picks up eyes, nose, mouth. It picks up faces. It is one of the first areas of our brain that responds to stimulus, and you notice it right after birth. You can respond more to faces than any other stimulus. So faces are very important. We have mirror neurons. Mirror neurons reflect what behavior we're watching. And so as somebody else is behaving, we're mimicking it in our brain. So you see someone ready to fall, you tense up because you've mirror neuron and you have followed that. Sensory receptors. Those in sensation perception know that our sensory receptors are wired to see change, not consistency. We like change. We like stimulus changing. Therefore, let's change the stimulus a little. So the bottom line, we have brains that are designed to find danger, remember danger, watch for socially acceptable behavior, and mirror it. This does not sound very optimistic to me. This actually doesn't even sound calm. Danger, danger. So, when we have this wiring together, there's one more piece I want to add to this. Before birth, the wiring diagram between these brain structures are forming and organizing stimuli associated with emotional responses. Maternal voice patterns can be deciphered from other human voices at the time of birth. Once born, associations and reinforcements between the smell of our mother and arrival of food and shelter are paired together. Beyond this, humans spend many of their initial months learning that their left hands can function together with their right hands, and then separately. So we are always learning and finding contingencies and rationalizing our environment. And these associations that have positive outcomes get reinforced by our internal motivation, which brings me to this area right here, nucleus accumbens. It's a little blurry, but it's this nice big area right here that reinforces and seeks reward. So, located in the base of our frontal lobe at the end of our brainstem, the neurotransmitter dopamine stimulates neurons in the nucleus accumbens. This stimulation is equal to our motivation. When this happens, whatever we're doing, that action that got rewarded, we want to do again. We get trophy for it. Dopamine trophy. So at times, this area labeled our reinforcement center, or in my opinion, mislabeled as our pleasure center, activates the areas with dopamine. And we don't always get that wahoo response that we would expect, like if you go to a casino. People at casinos don't say wahoo. They just play with the machine. But all the while, if we have a connection between something that's reinforcing and a behavior that we're doing, then we start to wire, and we start to wire that connection that leads to a pattern of behavior that we're going to repeat. This can be, wahoo, we won a lot of money, or there's food, even if you don't like the food, there's food. So essential activities and great activities of our lives are reinforced. But please don't be fooled that all rewarding situations are essentially socially appropriate, or planet-saving, or non-injurious. Especially for this talk, political behavior is reinforced through this pathway, the behavior that makes us feel good. So, we need to circle back to the hunter-gatherer. Human, to be sure, living without what we now call creature comforts, like running water, regulated room temperature, shelter, abundant food that shows up at regular intervals. Not the life that we are living now at Harlexton. Much more of a challenge. Although you may not feel that your creature comforts are taken care of here, they are. Although we've not resolved ongoing issues with hunger, homelessness, other threats to life, first world nations do live in relative comfort. So give me that wiggle room. We live in pretty nice comfort. We rarely face a threat to life or limb. There are always threats to peace, to comfort, things like illness. Who hasn't had an illness this term? Hide. Loss of a loved one, a very serious threat to our comfort and peace. Job loss, all these are unwelcome, frustrating to some extent, disheartening, but they're not life-threatening events. What happens when humans evolve for survival what happens when they now live in relative comfort? In large societies that are governed by human-made rules and human-reasoned decisions. So what do? We try to make up for that lack of terror in our lives. And so we come into fun little activities like going to Cedar Point. Wait for it. Get to the right spot. This is the dragster. You're going 120 miles per hour. That's Lake Erie. Oh, wait. It's 35 seconds later and we're done. So, that's a really fine way to make up for the lack of terror in our everyday lives. Isn't that great? Trust your engineers, it works. Okay, so besides making scary movies or pulling practical jokes on people or developing haunted houses or human drama, we make up for those scary times that we're expecting through all of these. Also, how are we working with reasoning? Well, we see what we want to see. The allegory of the cave, Plato. So, a couple people, okay, another show of hands. Who knows the allegory of the cave? Ah, bright folks. Okay, so there's some prisoners in a cave. And they can only see one wall, and on that wall they have a reflection of a fire and they have some reflection of sunlight. And there's people moving around in the cave behind them, putting images on the wall, and they are starting to assume that those images are real things because that's all they can see. So you only know what you can see. Okay, anybody here seen The Truman Show? The movie, The Truman Show. They've made an entire false world for him. This is the cave allegory placed in an extreme reality show. Okay, anyone believe something that was trending on Facebook or Twitter? Oh, not so many people raising their hand admitting to this. It's another we believe what we see. We see the trend. We see everyone jumping onto this. We see it's true. Okay, so we trust that this is true because it's familiar, not because there was a critical analysis. So I found a cartoon. They're playing out the allegory of the cave, and this guy, pardon my French, says, "Holy crap, Stan, it's a giant spider." "No, Ted, it's just Jerry and his lame shadow puppets." And then you get a scene looking straight onto them. "Give it up, Jerry. We figured you out." "I can't believe I almost fell for this trick." They were believing what they thought was true, but there was actually a large spider behind him, so I totally flipped the analogy that there was actually something behind it. Just seeing if you're awake. So we only know what we see. We seek patterns. Humans are pattern-seeking, storytelling animals. We are quite adept at telling stories about patterns, whether they exist or not. Neuroscience example of this. This is a painting by an Italian painter, Giuseppe Artimboldo. I will try. Where he loved to paint fruits, vegetables, books, animals, but place them in images that look like a person. Someone who can't see faces, prosopagnosia, will tell you that that's a beautiful cherry and that's some sort of gourd, and there's an unripe pumpkin, but can't see the face. Okay. Correlation is not causation is another very critical structure. I piled through the internet and found this lovely graph. Not to pick on people in Kentucky, but the marriage rates in Kentucky went down across the years at the same level as drowning after falling out of a fishing boat. So, did he fall out of the fishing boat and she drowned him and so they were no longer married? Or is that just a correlation and one doesn't cause the other? It's amazing how many times you can see trends that follow the same line and really have nothing to do with each other. So it is really critical that we use the scientific method as a process to have a clear understanding of the world and the processes therein. Keeping in mind the caveat that the scientific method is carried out by humans who are inherently flawed. But it's the best that we have. Okay. Common sense is neither common across time, nor a lot of sense at the time. So let's get some golden oldies out of here. The sun is a horse-driven chariot that gets driven across the sky every day. Yeah. For the people in abnormal psychology, mental disease is demon possession. The earth is flat. Oh, for the biologists out there, maggots spontaneously generate out of rotted meat. But some of these we have been able to disregard, and the earth does rotate around the sun, and now so does a Tesla. Okay. However, when I was looking this up, there's a chat going on, and there are tons of people who are claiming that this is fake, and how the lighting and everything shows that it's fake. Already, just this week. Okay, so another challenge to reasoning within this first world problem is ego protection and self-preservation. We want to extend ourselves to our troop. Liking someone or associating ourselves with a group or tribe does not in itself validate trust in that person or troop. However, our ego, our self-worth, gets in the way and leads to illogical or a little self-defeating actions towards others. Our actions with others leads to combining their identity with ours. Therefore, when we protect those we like, we are then protecting ourselves. When this does not make the most sense to maintain this logic. So, have you heard or said anything like this? Well, I don't know, they don't do their job properly, but they're nice. I don't like the skills of my hairdresser, but I've been with him or her so long I can't leave. Oh, I want to advance my career, but it would hurt, scare, intimidate my family. Oh, okay, so I'm not asking for people to turn Machiavellian here and just to throw these people out because they're not doing what you expect them to, but to gently disentangle our self-worth and our personal needs from the needs to defend our social niche. To know that the person can be both nice and not do their job properly. They can, in the reverse, do their job very well and not have all the social graces you wish they had. To know that you are a loyal person, but you can leave your hairdresser. It's okay. But, so am I painting a picture that we are simply egotistical? We make our decisions based on our own emotion, which makes for bad logic. Well, let's go through a simple evaluation. We've done this before, right? Human exercise, reaching a rational decision. All right, I went to the Milan Paris show, found a dress. Cool dress, huh? But I need to make a logical choice of whether to purchase this or not. So I'm going to make a pro and cons list. Cons, easy to find, right? It's out of my budget. It does not fit. It doesn't really look like me. I have no place to wear it. It's hard to stand or sit in. It'll max out my credit cards. And most of all, my cat will climb up it and ruin it. Yeah. Pros. Because you always have to, be balanced, right? I like it. It'll encourage my dieting. It makes me feel good. And most of all, lace. So what's the decision? Have you ever had these lists with the long cons and the short pros, and what'd you do? You purchased it. Totally. No, I did not purchase this dress. However, we walk through these emotional decisions, these logical decisions, and make an emotional endpoint a lot. Is that a fault in our reasoning? Well, Antonio Damasato studied people with damage to part of their brain where their emotions are generated, the amygdala. He found that when they were trying to make decisions, when they were doing normal tasks, they could totally do those normal tasks. But when they were having trouble, they couldn't make decisions. They could describe what they should be doing in logical terms, yet they found it difficult to make a simple decision on what to eat. Something as tricky as, do you want chicken or turkey? They're both white meat, both good for me. They're both light in calories, light in fat. With no rational way to decide, these test subjects couldn't come to a decision because they didn't have their emotions pulling them from one to the next. So, we often pick the choice with the most emotional attachment. Keeping in mind that the core of our decision making keeping in mind that emotions are at the core of our decision making and that emotions drive our behavior long before we are able to make a cogent argument for a decision. So, before that 4-year-old can think through the marshmallow and write a thesis on it, their emotions have told them what they were going to do. So, in this quick rational decision making, I want to take a quick stop and talk about skepticism. So, in British Studies lecture this morning, we were introduced to British scientists who embraced skepticism. Great thinkers at the time argued it's better to think things through rather than to take the answer from authority, either the church or the royalty. When we're asked to discern between choices, a pattern of disagreement or simply saying no can be confused with skeptic discernment. No. We are, as we say in neuroscience, neophobic. We are afraid of new things. Now, being that it's unknown to us, our social group, or our environment, this new thing could be bad. It could be a threat. It could bring that death we are so hardwired to fear. It could break apart our social group for which we seek and find shelter. Mind you, something new has an equal chance of leading to a good result as it does a bad result. But the wiring of our brain does not allow us to do that. It goes into fail-safe mode. New is bad. We know this old way. We know the costs and the benefits. We're familiar with it. Therefore, we can control our stress. We are wired to say no. And any of you who had a toddler know that. Also, disagreement is seen by some as being thoughtful, reasoned, logical, when it really is the most simplistic of our wiring diagrams and the most evolutionarily comfortable solution. So, but what if? What if brings fear? But there's two ways to define fear. Forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. Oh, by summoning the strength to examine the new, truly examine the potential risks and benefits, being able to assume the risks of the new, we find better or worse ways to solve a problem. If the way is worse, we go back to the old way. If it's better, we more quickly move on to a better way to do things. Keep in mind, an instant no is not the most reasoned solution. It is the easiest and most evolutionarily comfortable solution. So, I've been talking about our wiring from the hunter-gatherer days. We found reasonable comfort being, and our newly found, in the relation to the length of human existence, comfort is being played out in our brains that are hardwired to see danger at every turn. We also look for emotional security, not happiness, just familiarity. Familiar surroundings, familiar people. These environments allow us to predict circumstances and therefore regulate our stress. In the extreme, that stress becomes a familiar comfort. We see danger in silence and calm. Quiet is intolerable. Commotion entertains our need for stimulation, those sensory receptors that need something new to happen. Pauses in conversation are awkward. That moment when the professor asks a question. And if you have a puppy, which I will soon, I will learn that silence is very, very suspicious. Okay. But what if we rationalize our safety and security by keeping with the familiar, close and the unfamiliar, those who are different socioeconomic class, skin color, religion, tradition, gender, distant. We are much happier. As I've heard many times before, and defended by greater scholars than I, when an argument describes a group action as quote-unquote they, as if one group of people holds completely identical thoughts and feelings on the topic, the argument is inaccurate. The liberals, they. The conservatives, they. The administration, they. The professors, they. Men, they. Blacks, they. Ooh, it gets dark, doesn't it? Yeah. We can go on and on. Now, why do we do this? Why do we group in? The argument comes from a reflexive pattern seeking that our brain does. We are able to identify objects in particular groups quickly, such as food versus non-food. That's good to identify. You don't want to eat something that's not food. Especially when you're seeking vitamin C, you want to be able to know the orange from the white bread roll. Now, it's awesome to be able to do that. It's not awesome to go up to somebody who looks like the help and demand they bring you some fruit. That's the they we don't want to be doing. We categorize so that we can understand our worlds, but categorization can go too far. So, back to the trends. Hopefully I've laid down enough groundwork that we can work through these. Okay, so we are socialized to be in groups. Our emotion keeps us there. Our fear of new keeps us there. And our ability to rationalize ourselves there keeps us there. Yeah. So we end up with some people who take advantage of that. Now, my examples are for the United States. I didn't get too far into the British because that's confusing. Okay, so we looked in and saw where some hyperpartisanship and some nationalism has been shaped throughout the United States. Okay, so what do we get? We get folly and inconsistency within a realm. We get groupthink over group needs, unity over diversity. That doesn't sound like it makes sense, but unity of that peer group over diversity of including others. So what do we see? We see people, like I made these color choices, red, white, and blue, when they forget the American tenet of nationalism is built on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And those in the UK will probably argue this point, but I was trying to find an equal life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for the UK, but you all didn't start with one constitution. So I came up with equal application of the rule of law, the general tenet of if there's a rule, you live by it, and everyone lives by it the same. So what we want to understand is, where did this come from? So where did we get this in US politics? Where did we go from bipartisanship, negotiation, and leadership to hyperpartisanship, wrangling, and winner-takes-all attitudes? It had a beginning, in my humble opinion as a neuroscientist, with a wish that built a social movement. So, political wrangling is not new. You can look at any time in history and see pros versus cons. There's been many factions. But for the last 40 years in the United States, we do have a real interesting pattern starting. Kern Swint, who is a historian, political science historian, wrote a book in 2008 which highlighted some actions of Roger Ailes. He was on the election campaign for Richard Nixon, a president many years ago. He conversed with Nixon about a conservative messaging television station. Also, Alex helped form and carry out Nixon's Southern strategy. Oh. So, later on, Ailes continued to be involved in many campaigns. Reagan, Bush, on through, bringing to what, as one person said, an art of the negative campaign. Yay, we don't like those. Furthermore, other factors came in. 1979 showed cameras coming into our Congress and our Senate, which sounds wonderful. We, the people, can see our politicians making rules. We can follow what they say. But it also put them on a stage. And it also, now we could see our constituents carrying out or not carrying out the hyper rhetoric we heard on the stump on their way to office. Along came Joe Coors, who started a conservative television station and also helped start the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative think tank that comes up with rational and reasoning to justify a conservative approach to politics. Our Federal Communications Commission, in 1949, right near after World War II, required that holders of broadcast license, news reporters, present both controversial sides on an issue of public importance, and to do so honestly, equitably, and balanced. That was removed in 1987. What happened right after that? Newt Gingrich had a contract with America that said, we want all these things. We don't want what the broad group of people want, and allowed the Congress to turn over to Republican-led, which is fine, but this success was partnered with partisan actions like socially shaming Republicans for eating dinner with Democrats, labeling restaurants as Democrat, which is the wrong version of the word, it's Democratic, and Republican, which I should just say Republic then, right? Also using the technology of the time, the fax machine, to spit out talking points to all members of the same party. To put icing on these events, enter two opposing cable news channels in 1996, MSNBC and Fox News. Ailes left NBC and was hired by Rupert Murdoch to head up Fox News, wherein Fox News had taken this more hyperpartisan, tribalistic way of presenting that was seen on AM radio and turned it into entertainment. Not dry news, we need ratings. To keep our brains in a constant state of warning, a constant state of alertness, our sensory systems seek change and jump. Oh, right. Fear's the path to the dark side. Yoda, hold on. So, and jump to breaking news. Breaking news. Titanic sunk 120 years ago tonight. Breaking news? How about breaking news? Trump has woman pull his hair to see if it's real. Breaking news? Breaking news. Man arrested for breaking into homes and tickling buttholes. It's a real thing. Someone put this on their newscast to get your attention. Breaking news. Halloween candy's bad for your teeth. Oh no. If you didn't know that, I'm sorry. Oh, happening now. Sunchip bags noisy. Breaking news. Now underneath is 14 people killed when vehicle plummets from... So that's more the danger, not that sunchip bags are noisy. But what do? This keeps our brain alert, our sensory systems. We want to know. Oh, we have to decide. Should I buy sunchip? It says they're bad. My peer group says they're bad. So, what do we see from all of this? We see social gripping, fear of the others, lack of presentation of a fairness doctrine through all of these changes, reason through authority mixed in with information delivered in a vacuum. You know the people who just watch MSNBC. You know the people who just watch Fox. My 87-year-old mother watches all of them so that she can get the reasoning down and the logic and to see what they're doing. Love it. So, we're in a big mess. We have been building in our society this hyperpartisanship, this nationalism. So let's end with, what can we do about this? Remember the marshmallow test. Don't go after the instant gratification. Think it through, go after the harder, which is better in the long run. Recognize that we are built on reacting with fear, insecurity, and self-doubt. See that in others too. Help them see that in their choices. This builds the them versus us, which we really don't need to have. Nobody out there is the saber-toothed tiger anymore. Recognize that there are several solutions to a problem. There's the way that we instinctively do it, that we've been reinforced to do it, that our dopamine pathways say, yes, this is how you do it, but there might be another way. And it might actually be an easier way. First world security brings responsibility. No, ignorance has been considered bliss, but only in the short term, not in the long term. Understand that there's a responsibility to look deeper, to understand more, to ask more questions. And don't forget to be a reporter. Who is telling you the news? What is actually happening? Are you ignoring the action because it's foreign to you? Why are they doing it? What's their potential motivation? What's the emotion that's driving them? When are they doing it? Is it a consistent pattern of behavior, or are they doing it in only a special situation that's good for them? How is the event happening? Is it done in haste, or was it done with planning? Is it a reaction to an event, or is it something that has been thought through? Where is the event happening? Who's in the crowd? Who's the audience? Okay, so as we're trying to look through all these things, of course, we can't do all of this to every news source that comes to us, or everything our politicians say, and live our lives, pursue our careers, take care of our loved ones. We need to do that tried and true, evolutionarily supported action, trust our environment, and in this case, how we're getting our political news. However, that trust must come through earning, studying, and examining. We can get to the edge on our emotions and their deep ties to our relationship by knowing how our brain works, how it's attracted to new and shiny things, how it is built to protect us from danger, harm, and insecurity, but can do so by putting us in ultimate danger and harm and keep us insecure. So, realize we're reacting with insecurity in the hopes of bending political trends of hyperpartisanism and nationalism, as I've defined them. I hope we can all be wary in our trust, and put our trust in political news sources and not take their word on the merits of it sounds good to us, it makes us feel good, it entertains us, or it makes you aware of frightening things in this world. Thanks. Uh-oh. Carolyn.
I want to know why you use Kentucky statistics.
Oh, that's a political question, isn't it?
That's my home state.
Next question. Yes.
Hi, my name is Chris. Thank you for your talk. I enjoyed it. It's been thought-provoking. So you basically, I think, touched on the nature versus nurture argument, whether or not we can have our political opinions, like if we have a disposition due to the chemical makeup of our brain with certain political, affiliations. Then with nurture, you have, the role of your parents, the impact of the community, things like that. That can influence your political disposition. So does nurture have a place in your thesis, or do you think that it's mostly a nature argument?
Ooh, good question. So, nurture can have an influence when you put yourself in the nurturing environment of analyzing what you're listening to and getting down to the original source and, okay, is that writer of this bent or that bent? Is that news source of this bent or that bent? What actually happened and who was in the room? So you can train yourself. There are studies that pull out personalities that tend to be more conservative and tend to be more liberal. It does not track with introvert extrovert, but it does track with those who tend to see more positive from an outcome tend to be more liberal, and those who see more negative potential outcomes seem to be more conservative, which falls to reason with the I'm afraid of something new, therefore I'm going to. The original idea of conservatism is not change, and liberalism is change. Yeah, we're doing it fine here. Why change? This works great. Or, oh, we see something we need to change. But I don't think that there's actually you are nurtured from your family life to be one or the other. Case in point, I have 3 other siblings. 2 of us are Republican, 2 of us are Democrat. My parents are like, what happened? We don't talk to politics a lot. Others? Oh, good. Yes, Sarah.
So you're talking about, just the critical analysis of the news in general, just to make a rational decision rather than an emotionally charged decision. So have you devised any strategies to actually kind of like install this mindset into the general population, or do you see it as a personal?
Do I have any strategies to install? The only thing I can think that's tried and true and out there and thinking of Tamara a lot when I got to this is question. News is not supposed to be an authoritative source. Yes, the reporters work really hard to get where the information they're getting, but always challenge and question. That's why we have a whole opinion page. To challenge and question. Yes?
Just an interesting parallel with the world I work in, which is music, as I think you know. I've always encouraged students that I teach to ask questions, not to take what I say as gospel. So you should always say, why? What? One of the students I taught at the Conservatoire in Birmingham had a very eminent organist that he played in a master class, and he didn't agree with what he was being told by this chap. And so he questioned it. And he questioned it to the extent that this man couldn't answer. And he was actually backed right into the corner because he actually couldn't support what it was he was asking this student to do. But the other thing, what you're saying, I find fascinating, is what you're saying is dig down, learn, find out all the background, isn't it? And then sift all that sort of information. And what I was told when I studied with Gustav Leonard, a harpsichordist organist in Amsterdam a long time ago, back in the 1970s, and he said, read everything, read all the source material, read all the prefaces, learn, as much as you can. But he said, then when you go on stage to perform, then you have to communicate with an audience, and you must forget it all. Then the punchline, which maybe relates exactly to what you're saying for people. He said, but first, before you can forget something, you must know something.
Exactly. Yes. That is completely a tenet in learning theory and psychology. You can't forget if you haven't learned.
But it becomes part of your subconscious as a musician. This is interesting
Hardwired.
as well.
Hardwired.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't even realise then that you're actually responding to information that you know because you've done that digging down.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes part of yourself in some way.
Exactly.
Yeah. And this is really what you're saying, isn't it? It's in a different field. It's in a different. part of our sort of world, but it's exactly the same way of thinking about learning and responding.
Exactly. Ben?
So,
Oh, yes.
To what extent do you think time, or lack of it, is a criminal thing? Because if you take
Yes.
emotion and logic, it's a process has to take place, out of which should
Yes.
come a decision. So shall we say before tweets were invented, somebody might be very hard up for communicating right now.
Right.
But everything in the modern world of communications sucks time out of the equation. They don't have time to get together, to create decisions to discuss. So is time criminal?
Time is definitely essential. Several years ago, I did a talk about how all these widgets and gadgets are pulling our attention. And we also hear about, how all these widgets and gadgets don't allow us to focus. And that sensory stimulus pulls us to the next thing. And we forget where our keys are more because we're pulled to the next thing. And we forget where our glasses are more because we're pulled to the next thing. We're not paying attention even to our micro worlds. One thing that we have to, as another first world problem, is force ourselves not to go after those shiny things and slow down and take the time. As we've gotten all this technology, we haven't gotten, and I'll look to the economists in the room, we actually haven't gotten more productive. Productivity is going up, but not at the rate that computer speeds are going up. Well, it can't, because we're human and they're computers, and that's a whole other story. But we're actually getting more distracted. How many re-examine your PowerPoint notes with the screen open and a chat box open and a video running and a phone going off with a conversation here and there? How much are you actually spending attention to those notes on the screen then? Not. So yes, definitely take time.
So I actually really like this because it's like combining like my past 2 majors.
Yay!
So how would you suggest that we separate like emotion from influencing like facts and like 'cause I know a lot of times you see stuff on the media and it's just like you have to like actually look it up and like see where that's coming from.
Right.
And sometimes it doesn't always agree with your like emotions or like what you would like that to be. So like is there really a plausible solution for us to separate that from each other?
It falls into my definition of being a responsible adult. Being a responsible adult is not avoiding the dragster. I love the dragster. It is taking the time, again, to know yourself, to know your emotions, to know what will tick you off and what will make you go, oh yeah, I totally agree with that, without thinking twice. And the more you can understand your needs and your emotional reactions and be able to explain them to yourself, this is not easy. Again, we grew up with emotions long before we had language. So it's hard to put that into language, even to ourselves. When has a friend called you out on some emotion you're expressing and you had no idea? Are you okay today? I'm fine. Ooh, maybe I'm not. So we need to slow down and spend more time learning who we are and what we really want. Are we taking this in because it's shiny? Oh, the butthole tickler. Or is it because we really care that someone goes around and does that? Had anybody heard of them? I hope not. Didn't make my news feeds.
so with this overload of social media now being presented to us, and like once we make a decision and we are picking a side and everything, how difficult is it to admit either conceit or defeat once you're proven wrong?
Oh, we don't like to be wrong. That hurts our feelings. Thus our problem in the first place, we have feelings. Yeah, that's more of knowing yourself. We are, like I said, scientific method's the best method we have for knowing things, but we're fallible humans. And coming to grips with that is very critical in growing up. You get to mess up. Yes.
How do you deal with multiple emotions? And how they play together or not? Like, I'm thinking of emotion empathy,
Mm-hmm.
which might, work differently with fear, or it could reinforce the belonging. It could be only empathy for some of others.
Yeah,
So how do you deal with like multiple?
I'm afraid of how my hairdresser's making me look, but I empathize that she needs a job and I want to keep going to her and giving her money.
So they're
Yeah.
playing out their.
We are not simple. We are complicated. Yeah, that takes even more focus.
I just wondered with like the neuro, let's say, on that. And I wondered about the brains.
Well, we have an area for rage and fear. You know, we're afraid of something or we're going to fight that thing. We don't have, like I said, we don't have a joy area. We don't have a celebration area. That comes from experience. So an old tenet, you don't know happiness until you know sadness. Wow, doesn't that stink? You don't know joy until you know failure, because you have to have something to compare it to. Have you ever met somebody who has everything they ever wanted and they're bored out of their gourd? Because they have no challenges in life. We are built, that hunter-gatherer, to have challenges. So when people are like, oh, life's so hard, I'm like, no, it's life. John.
Thank you very much for doing this. I was wondering, do you see any sort of limits on the possibility for this kind of neurophysiological analysis of our cognition? Because the general message is sort of a low-level emotion-based snap judgment type of thing that presumably gets checked or defeated or overturned by some sort of deeper or more, I use the word reason, reflection on the whole thing, right?
Right.
I guess the example you used that really stood out to me was the dress buying deliberation, right? So you have this long list of, let's face it, pretty good reasons not to buy the dress. You got a pretty short list of, let's face it, pretty lousy reasons to buy it. You end up buying it because that's the emotional decision. But wait a minute, the lesson was there was, don't buy the dress, right? That's the right answer. That's where we're supposed to. But is there something neurophysiological about that judgment? I mean, how high does this go? All of our cognition presumably is, it's evolutionarily inherited to select for reproductive fitness.
Right.
Not necessarily for what is moral or good or right or anything. So I'm worried that the kind of analysis is just let's run wild, eats everything. It repeats itself, it repeats those higher level cognitions.
We may never get there. Yeah. It depends on how much we want to grab onto that. We cannot be computer pure logic, because if we develop, if we remove our emotion centers, we can't make a decision. Emotion has to be in that. And it's a study that will give you a cool example for this. There were folks that were sworn they were pure logic decision makers. They didn't let their emotions decide. You put them in a functional MRI to see their brain firing as they're making a decision. First thing that fires is their emotional centers. Then it goes up to their reason, logic, frontal cortex. And then that makes the story that makes them the most happy that they're using reason and logic. Oops. Know your emotions. Can we evolve to the next level of thinking? It takes work. It takes a lot of work.
But would we want to, right? I mean, all these ethical judgments we're making are presumably, they're exhortations to watch out for your emotions. They're going to lead you
Yeah.
Just try to get control of them, start thinking
Right.
about them. All right, but those higher level judgments, we want to leave those alone, right? We don't want those.
No, we want them, but we want the whole picture. So going to what's the factory we went to? Saltaire? Yes, where an industrialist said, I don't like how this industrialization is happening. These people living in squalor, in horrible conditions, children are working. I'm gonna go off and make a utopia somewhere, build a new factory, put lights in, gave them 2-bedroom homes as part of their work, a living wage, a self-respect, what they have in the town, a church, a performance area, quite a few. So they made a decision for I need to build something. These people need a job and they need their emotions met. They need their social needs met. So both together have to play together. How about, if you have any other questions, come talk to me, and I think there are some beverages over there. Hey,